One moment, the woman was a gentle and kind mother, but in the next, she bared her fangs and lunged at the man in front of her. In the previous episode, Rebecca was sealed and locked away in the depths of the ocean by the Tristan siblings. In a desperate attempt to find her, the Michelson family kidnapped Tristan. To rescue Tristan, who had been taken hostage by the Originals family, Aya sought out Marcel, asking him to lead a deadly rescue mission with his man. Marcel responded that this wasn't a rescue, it was a suicide mission for everyone involved. Aya drew out a dagger, stating that plunging it into Elijah's body would put him into an eternal sleep. Marcel has no choice but to go through with it. Tristan, suffering agonizing pain from Haley's bite, stubbornly refused to reveal the other half of the coordinates where Rebecca was being held captive. He even claimed that reinforcements would soon arrive to save him. Haley prepared to continue the interrogation, but when Mary arrived unexpectedly, Haley had to pause and return to deal with family matters. Freya took over as the interrogator, using her magic to weaken Tristan's abilities. Elijah then stepped in to invade Tristan's mind, but all he could see were fragmented images and a single word Cephus. Yet Tristan stubbornly refused to explain what it meant. Marcel appeared uninvited, suggesting that Elijah should let Tristan go and pretend it was he who had rescued him, allowing Marcel to infiltrate the vampire organization and find out where Rebecca was being held. Elijah, however, dismissed the Strix as insignificant and had no intention of letting Tristan go. Freya was keeping watch over Tristan. Tristan, however, remarked that Freya was loyal to her younger siblings in the family, but she had forgotten the one she loved most, Finn. Freya instinctively grasped the sapphire necklace around her neck. Little did she know, even this seemingly casual gesture didn't escape Tristan's sharp eyes. Seeing that Elijah refused to cooperate, Marcel decided to take a more aggressive approach, pulling out a dagger hidden in his coat. A large number of vampires also emerged from the shadows. Freya quickly dispatched one of the vampires, but Aya suddenly lunged at her, catching her off guard and stabbing her. Freya collapsed to the ground, teetering on the edge of death. Tristan was saved. Elijah engaged in a fierce battle with the vampires. Across the street, Haley keenly picked up on the commotion. Mary tried to persuade Haley to stay out of it, but Haley turned around without hesitation, leaping across the street and swiftly taking down one of the vampires. Elijah and Haley locked eyes. Seizing the opportunity, Marcel plunged the dagger into Elijah's heart. Elijah fell to the ground, quickly losing consciousness. The sudden turn of events left Haley in shock. Two vampires lunged at her, swiftly overpowering and subduing her, but Marcel suddenly stepped in, ripping out the hearts of the two vampires. This erratic change of sides left Haley utterly confused. Marcel said nothing more and quickly left, urging Aya to take Tristan and flee, warning that Elijah's reinforcements were already on their way. Aya left without hesitation, while Marcel approached the barely conscious Freya, offering her his blood and reminding her that he wasn't her enemy. They returned to Marcel's place, where Marcel took out Klaus's blood and had Tristan drink it. Marcel's actions earned Tristan's trust, and he finally succeeded in infiltrating the vampire organization. When Elijah regained consciousness, he was still furious, but both Haley and Freya believed that Marcel was a double agent. Elijah then saw the blood-splattered painting. This undoubtedly confirmed yet another part of the prophecy. Haley returned home. Mary didn't scold Haley much, but she advised her, saying, "You're just a 25-year-old young mother, so why do you always risk your life to get involved in the Originals family's conflicts?" Haley replied that she wanted to teach her daughter to fight for her family, and she mentioned that she gave Jackson some time to think, but he was always welcome to come back home. Elijah soon received a text from Marcel. He had found specific information about Cephus. It was an airplane operated by Tristan. He shared the information with Klaus. Together, they analyzed the flight path and determined that the intersection of the route with Aurora's half of the coordinates was where Rebecca was being held captive. A group of pirates hauled up a seaweed-covered crate. The leader said that this was the treasure Elijah had paid a fortune to retrieve and that they should make sure to charge him extra for it. Elijah appeared in the warehouse and, without saying a word, began slaughtering everyone in sight, leaving no witnesses alive. Inside the open crate lies a girl, the sleeping Rebecca. On Rebecca's pale wrist was a strange scar, a scar that could control her mind and transform her into a dark goddess. The dagger that sealed her had been enchanted with black magic. Rebecca had fallen under its spell. Christmas was approaching. Klaus's home was filled with a peaceful and joyful atmosphere, and he and Camille finally had a rare moment of leisure. But Camille soon received a text from Vincent. Kinney, who worked with them, was feeling down and urgently needed someone to talk to, forcing them to cut their conversation short. Haley was also ready to end the Cold War with her husband. She took the initiative to visit the cabin in the bayou. However, Jackson asked Haley if she was still in love with Elijah. They had been married for nearly a year, yet he still couldn't be sure of his wife's feelings.
Even when I'm pissed as hell, I would rather be near you than anywhere else. Now what kind of fool does that make me?
Haley swore that even if the house across the street caught fire today, she wouldn't care. They finally put aside their differences and decided to spend a happy Christmas together. Jackson also let go of his doubts. He had carefully prepared a giant Christmas tree but unexpectedly spotted Freya, who was being closely watched by a strange man. Freya walked into an empty parking lot. The man quickly appeared behind her, but she swiftly subdued him. However, two other vampires appeared immediately, with one grabbing Freya by the throat while the other rummaged through her bag and found the magical weapon, the once mighty millennia-old, which was now as helpless as a lamb awaiting slaughter. Unable to fight back, Jackson rushed in wielding an axe, quickly dispatching one of the vampires, but the other vampire picked up the weapon and fled. Jackson's golden eyes gleamed handsomely in the warm winter sunlight as he approached, lifted the bleeding Freya in his arms, and carried her away from the scene. Camille arrived alone at Kinney's cabin. Klaus appeared unexpectedly behind her. Annoyed, Camille insisted that she wasn't a porcelain doll that needed to be watched over 24/7, but Klaus said he was there as a friend to help. When Kinney's door didn't open for a long time, Camille sensed something was wrong. Klaus, with his sharp hearing, detected the sound of a gun being cocked inside the room, and he kicked the door open. Kinney was about to commit suicide. Kinney had been brainwashed by Lucien's compelling words. Convinced that his life was bleak and no longer worth living, Camille looked to Klaus for help. But as a vampire, Klaus needed an invitation from the homeowner to enter the house. Haley arrived hurriedly, pushing a stroller. Jackson explained what had happened, and Haley bit into her wrist, using her blood to heal Freya. When they heard the weapon was lost, they were deeply troubled. Elijah appeared before them with Rebecca, saying that it was best to deal with the immediate problem first. Freya examined the scars on her sister's wrist and said she could try to break the spell, but it would require some special materials and powerful magic. As Freya stood up, she suddenly felt dizzy, and Elijah quickly caught her, placing her on the couch. Elijah brushed aside his sister's hair and noticed a small wound on Freya's neck. She had also been poisoned by the vampire organization. Everyone grew tense at once. Klaus, now invited into Kinney's home, keenly noticed a flaw in Lucien's compulsion. Klaus began to comfort Kinney in his own way, telling him that others would recognize his worth and reminding him to take a vacation with his family. Camille looked at Klaus with a complex expression. For the first time she realized that under her influence the man had changed completely. He had learned to care about the life and death of strangers. Their relationship took a significant step forward. Freya and Rebecca both fell victim to the poison. Rebecca, now quick to anger, got into a fight with Haley over the slightest disagreement. Freya wasn't doing much better. Despite her own suffering, she insisted on breaking the curse on her sister, with blood constantly streaming from her eyes. Finn, stored within the blue necklace, kept muttering to Freya, telling her that these ungrateful siblings weren't worth her sacrifice. Elijah also wished his sister wouldn't push herself so hard, his concern entirely for her well-being. Even Finn was touched by his brother's concern, but Freya remained resolute, even asking her brothers for help. After her persistent pleas, Elijah decided to strengthen her with his own blood. Finn also generously lent her his magic. Klaus finally learned of the crisis at home, saying that Lucien must have the antidote and that they should go get it immediately. He insisted that Camille accompany him because he couldn't afford to be distracted by worries about her safety. To his surprise, Camille agreed. Meanwhile, Tristan was plotting his next deadly move. He intended to install a new puppet regent to control the witch faction, but the ancestral witches mercilessly rejected him. Upon hearing this, Marcel quickly sought out Vincent, urging him to step up and take on the responsibility. After much prodding, Vincent relented, saying he had found his path and would take over as regent, then walked away. Marcel, however, smiled mysteriously. Rebecca and Haley's fight grew more intense, and they tumbled down the stairs. The loud noise alerted Elijah, who signaled Jackson to watch over Freya while he went out to intervene. Rebecca, her eyes black as night, had Haley pinned to the ground, but Elijah stepped in and urged her to regain her senses. Rebecca's eyes returned to their normal color. Just as everyone began to relax, Rebecca's pupils turned black again, and she plunged her hand into Haley's chest, gripping her heart. In the nick of time, Klaus arrived. He seized his sister's wrist and pinned her down on the table. Camille handed the antidote they had brought to Haley. Haley then passed the vial to Jackson. By this time, Freya had already lost consciousness, so Jackson injected the antidote into her body, and Freya quickly regained consciousness. Without wasting a moment, Freya began chanting a spell, and the dagger gradually turned red hot. Rebecca was nearing the brink of madness. With Klaus and Elijah struggling to pin her down on the table, Freya rushed over with the knife, and with a swift motion, she carved out the flesh around Rebecca's scar, all while chanting continuously. The rotting flesh fell away completely, and Rebecca passed out from the pain. The spell was a success. Haley and her husband returned home to find Hope playing with an old wooden rocking horse in her hands. They embraced Hope and together headed to Klaus's mansion. The two families shared a warm holiday together. Even Klaus, for once, refrained from making snide remarks to Jackson and instead sincerely thanked him for saving Freya's life. This uncharacteristic behavior from Klaus left Jackson feeling a bit uneasy. Rebecca, stunning in a red dress, made a breathtaking entrance. As always, she encouraged everyone to honor tradition by writing down their wishes and throwing them into the fire. With family, friends, and loved ones by their side, the original siblings gathered around the bonfire to make their New Year's wishes. While Marcel, however, remained alone in the gym, Tristan arrived uninvited. Marcel informed him that the newly appointed regent of the witch faction was Vincent, whose greatest fear was being possessed by Finnegan. Armed with this intel, Tristan immediately sought out Vincent with his men, using the blue necklace as a threat to force Vincent into submission, to avoid being possessed by Finnegan. Vincent reluctantly agreed. After the recent battles, the Originals family was able to enjoy a beautiful Christmas. In the warm and festive atmosphere, the three Originals siblings gathered around the bonfire to make their wishes. Klaus, however, pointed out that their enemies still didn't know that Rebecca had been rescued, meaning she would have to continue hiding. Rebecca glanced back at Hope, and though reluctant, she accepted this decision with grace. The joyful moments were fleeting, and soon it was time for Rebecca to leave. She bid a tearful farewell to her family and apologized for nearly killing Haley. Klaus wished his sister luck in finding a handsome fool someday, but Rebecca replied that it was time for her to stay away from love, and it was time for her brother to embrace his own. She looked back at Camille, and Klaus gave a knowing smile. Rebecca departed. As the commotion died down, Freya stood beside Elijah and mentioned that 100 years ago, she had snuck into this house in disguise, believing at the time that she would always be an outsider. Freya told Elijah that this had been the best Christmas she had ever had. Elijah gently took her hand in comfort. Klaus, with a hint of hesitation, walked toward Camille. They gazed into each other's eyes, exchanging heartfelt confessions. The atmosphere thick with passion, Klaus finally has the love of his life. They shared a deep kiss and then joyfully ascended to the heights of passion, becoming one under the gentle night sky. Rebecca, who was supposed to have left, found her brother Elijah instead. She showed him the reappearing witchcraft scars on her wrists. Elijah was shocked. Rebecca insisted that he seal her away, as it was the only way to prevent her from harming the family. In response to Rebecca's pleas, Elijah plunged the dagger into her heart. They decided to keep this secret completely hidden, letting everyone believe that she was out in the world, living freely and carefree on her own. Klaus awoke from a beautiful dream only to be horrified by the sight of his hands covered in blood. Camille lay beside him, her throat slashed, her body drenched in blood, dead in his bed. The loss of his love nearly drove Klaus to madness. While he remembered the happy times with Camille, he walked around the room like a trapped animal. Memories of their time together flooded his mind, while he could do nothing but hold Camille's lifeless body in his arms. But suddenly, Camille jolted awake, and she saw Klaus's tear-streaked face. As Camille regained her senses, she remembered everything. Aurora compelled Camille, and after Camille confirmed Klaus's love, she drank Aurora's blood and slit her wrists, not even allowing Camille to cry out for help. Camille painfully realized that she was already dead and was now in the process of turning into a vampire. Klaus, consumed with rage, vowed to make Aurora pay for this, but Camille was quickly overwhelmed by an intense and growing hunger. Elijah arrived after hearing the news and reported that Freya's pendant was also missing. Elijah reminded his brother that Tristan needed the regent to activate the weapon, and the soul of Finn, trapped in the pendant, was Vincent's greatest weakness. Klaus realized their enemies had already sounded the horn of vengeance, and he was ready to strike back and sweep through their forces. But Elijah stopped him, pointing out that Camille, who was about to turn into a vampire, needed Klaus's help. Elijah decided to go and face the battlefield alone. Vincent was preparing to cast a spell, forced by Tristan to activate a weapon designed to take down the Originals. Tristan promised that once the spell was complete, he would hand over the necklace that contained Finn's soul. Vincent, his hands covered in blood, chanted the incantation. The secret weapon Seratura, capable of trapping the Originals, was successfully activated. He handed the Seratura to Tristan, reminding him to hand over the necklace, but Tristan betrayed him, ordering his men to restrain Vincent and give the necklace to a witch. He threatened that if Vincent didn't comply, he would have Finn possess his body, but Vincent was no pushover. He approached the witch holding the necklace, questioning why she had become a lackey for vampires and accusing her of being a traitor to her ancestors. A vampire stepped forward, warning the witch not to be distracted. Vincent then used a spell to break a statue above them, crushing one vampire beneath it, and quickly dispatched another with a deadly blow. He raised his hand and chanted a spell aimed at the witch, who uncontrollably dropped the necklace and collapsed, bleeding from her eyes and ears. But just as Vincent let his guard down, another vampire seized him from behind. In that moment, Elijah appeared, ripping out the vampire's heart, allowing Vincent to breathe a sigh of relief as he slumped to the ground. Elijah walked past him, picking up the necklace, causing Vincent to tense up. Elijah asked if he could undo the spell that activated the Seratura. Vincent replied that the spell was irreversible, and he still had no desire to get involved in vampire conflicts. Elijah had no choice but to shake the necklace threateningly, forcing Vincent to join their side. Haley and Jackson, who had just reconciled and were ready to end their separation, were ambushed by the vampire organization hiding in the forest. The couple fought bravely, but they couldn't withstand the overwhelming barrage of tranquilizers. Haley and Jackson were brought down by the drugs, collapsing to the ground. Camille was still tormented by an insatiable bloodlust, her agony unbearable. The usually warm and soothing sunlight now seemed blinding, intolerable to Camille in her fragile, transitional state. She looked at a photo of herself with her uncle, realizing that her family, which had endured for centuries, was now at its end. Klaus urged Camille to drink the blood, assuring her that she would soon discover the wonders of being a vampire. But Camille refused to succumb to becoming a blood-drinking monster. She feared that the darkness lurking within her would be magnified, stripping away all her good qualities. Without hesitation, Camille rejected Klaus's offer. Klaus, helpless in the face of his beloved's stubbornness, couldn't bring himself to force her. Their conversation reached a deadlock. Haley slowly regained consciousness, only to find Jackson beside her, covered in wounds. Jackson seemed to realize that his end was near, and with deep emotion, he expressed his love for his wife.
When I first saw you, I broke. You broke me. And nothing has ever been the same since.
But their tender moment was interrupted by Tristan's arrival. He said he had long awaited the chance to take revenge on Haley, and now he had finally found it. Tristan reached into Jackson's chest, and before Haley's horrified eyes and desperate screams, he mercilessly ripped out Jackson's heart.